effect.
Is that connected? Live stream?
Yeah, it's still going.
And you know what? Give me the link. Give me the link.
I'm going outside to check it out. I'm not trusting nothing.
You're also recording everything as well. It's recording everything on the cameras. We were able to get that set up as well.
I thought if you were streaming, it would work. No issue. YouTube, what's the link?
Okay.
It should be. I'm about to send it to you.
All right. Why is this mic not working?
Oh,
Bad hit on.
Does the mic work? There we go. Our university is home to quiet storms. I have a quiet storm going. Good afternoon. This is very exciting. I'm Dr. Benjamin Talton. I have the privilege of serving as director of the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center right across the hall. And this is a delight because this is the 21st of the Dorthy lecture series. We revived it. I'm so grateful to the team. It's a combination of MSRC staff and library staff coming together as they should to revive this lecture. And we're welcoming home two of alma mater's children here, Dr. Wood and Dr. Lopez Matthews, who really deserve a lot of credit for bringing Moorland and the library through this COVID storm and ensuring that we are on sure footing. So I'm very, very excited to welcome him back to alma mater. And this series is important because not only do we pride ourselves on preserving the legacy of the Global Black Experience at Moorland-Spingarn, we are the largest privately owned repository and library of the Global Black Experience. But these events are important because we're sharing the information. We're not just preserving history, we are sharing history. And we've been doing this in a lot of creative ways, including this lecture series, but also through social media, also through the museum. We have two exhibits up by Dr. A from African American Studies on Her Truth, Her Service. This is Dr. Ebola's exhibit that's downstairs in our new gallery, but also Hello Black World, The Voice in 3D, which is in the museum right down the hall. So if you have time today, open the doors and check those out. So this is part of how we not only celebrate 365 days of Black history, but we preserve, we teach, and we engage. So it's wonderful to see you here. For the undergraduates, I know you have to depart at 3 p.m. We will not be disrespected when you walk out the door. At 2 p.m. I'm sorry, at 2 p.m. But just, yeah, she was like, oh my goodness. But just do so quietly, we ask, and also grab a lunch on your way out. I know you were promised lunch, so it's there for you to take when you're back. So again, welcome to Moorland-Spingarn, welcome to the library. For those of you who are coming off campus, welcome to our university, the most beautiful and blackest place in the world. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, family, our family and community, Moorland-Spingarn. So many vets in the room. I'm glad to see all of you here. To the undergrads, you are our reason for being here, so we are glad you are here with us. All right. My name is Sonia Woods. I'm a university archivist here at Howard and in the University Archives Division of Moorland-Spingarn. And so I welcome you to the revitalized and reinstated Dorthy Wesley lecture series. There's a list on your program in the very back of all of our previous lectures and guest speakers who attended in the past. So we've had a 15-year hiatus, and so we are very pleased to be bringing this program back thanks to Dr. Johnson, who's our chief librarian. We have two special guests today. Our lecturer, for one, is Dr. Lopez Matthews, who I have had the pleasure to know and to work with, not only at Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, but in various capacities with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, just in various capacities. He is our guest lecturer today, and he's going to give us a presentation about not only his journey in the field as an archivist, a historian, a digitization preservationist, the state archivist of the District of Columbia, which is going to hear his story, also want to bring up and let you know and introduce you to Dr. Janet Sims Wood, who I'll be having a discussion with, who's a very special person to Moorland-Spingarn. She retired from the field as Assistant Chief Librarian. She is Dr. Lopez Matthews' mentor, and she provides a bridge between Dr. Matthews and Dorthy Wesley. So she's a very important link in the chain of history of not only Black librarianship, but Moorland-Spingarn Research Center and Howard University. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Janet Sims Wood up right here now. So, welcome home, and as I always say to you when you're in this building, I always say, welcome home. It's very good to have you today and to expose and introduce you to a wider community of scholars, people who may not have met you before, seen you, or heard your experience. I failed to mention that you are a published author and you published on Wesley, but we're going to get into that right now. First, though, I want to ask you about your journey in the library archivist historian field. How did that start? What was the inspiration for you? And just tell us a little bit about that, the beginning for you, and how that became, your life's work and what your legacy will be.
Well, believe it or not, it started in high school. First of all, my English teacher, we were doing a session one day on careers. And our English teacher told us that there was a need for librarian. So I went to the library, and the librarian started mentoring me. And believe it or not, we're still friends today. The English teacher and the librarian and I are still friends today. We still keep in contact. But she kind of adopted me, and she's the one that got me to North Carolina Central. She was with the North Carolina College when we were there. That was where she went to library school, and so she got me there. And so that's where we started. And when I first came to DC, I worked in private industry for a few years, Congressional Quarterly, a couple other places. And but then I got a job at the Martin Luther King Library in the Black Studies Division, which was really, really a wonderful place to work. And a lot of times you think about public libraries, and you just think about just the local people, but people came from all over to that collection as well. So that was where I kind of got my start in Black Studies. One day, Jake Johnson, who was here in Moorland-Spingarn, at that time he was the library in charge of the African collection, and Thomas Bell, who was the curator manager. They came through Black Studies and told me there was a job opening up here. And so I applied. And when I got here, the late Dorthy Dr. Ball's sister, she said, I was hoping it was you. She said, because you helped me in Black Studies. And to this day, I don't know what happened to say. I don't know. But she said, I was hoping it was you, so I got the job. And of course, because I already had some experience in Black history, when I got here, there was a bud base on my desk and a reference letter. I didn't get training. I got on the job training. I got that reference letter, and I just started to work. So it has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. I started out as, again, the African American history specialist, and then several years later, as assistant chief librarian.
From the left side, so you can get the
You started out as the African American reference librarian. What kind of work does that entail, your day-to-day job? And then what positions did you hold in between reference librarian and assistant chief librarian?
Well, basically, I don't have no position.
All right,
But when we came, our collections and records collection. So basically, a lot of times we had letters from all over the country for people asking about information. And what we would do, we would biographies and sent them to the library, to the researchers that were interested. And then they would get back and let us know if they wanted to make copies of anything. Reference, none of my materials went out. So, and of course, since we're here on the campus, we have an obligation to our students. So we had a lot of students that come in. There were times in that reading room when there was not an empty seat in there. We had people that were doing different things. We had our students who might have just been doing a paper for just to get a grade for their course. But also we had faculty who were needing resources for their students and also doing research themselves. So they needed resources. And then we had people coming from all over the world. We had a lot of Fulbright scholars that came through here. We had people coming in from India, from Japan, from China. So we had all kinds of researchers coming through, doing research here in the center. So it was just a wonderful time to be a reference librarian. And I think for me, to see that light go off in a person when they find something that they're looking for, that light that goes off, and this is what I was looking for. That was the most wonderful feeling, to know that you helped someone get the research that they needed.
One thing that struck me about what you just said is the mail that you would receive. And we have email now, so it's email and it's phone calls, but I'm curious to know if you remember about an average of how much reference inquiries or research inquiries would you get a week in mail?
Well, I don't remember right off, but we got quite a bit. And then, of course, we divided it. I was the reference librarian in charge of the African American collection. So we had also a librarian that was like James Johnson, so he was an African specialist. Marita Harper at that time was the Caribbean specialist, and of course, the retired Charlotte Pine who's in the audience now. Please raise your hand.
Thank you.
Caribbean specialist. And I will agree with everybody that used to work for Moorland, please raise your hand. All right. And I did that because it took all of us doing this work to make sure that people got the information that they needed. So, yes. Way before Google. So, so we definitely use that card catalog and all the references that we had there. Wonderful work of our collection in the reference department, and of course, downstairs with our manuscript division, our primary collection. So it was just a wonderful place to work. A lot of times, our manuscripts used to close when I was here for lunch every day. And so the people that would come in from out of town to do research in manuscript, sometimes before go there lunch and then come upstairs to finish working on getting information out of books and magazines. So it was, sometimes they would stay here 2 or 3 weeks doing research. So, as I say, that room would be filled. You didn't have an empty seat in there about days.
I don't want to go overboard, but I find it so fascinating to me. Now, for your work as a reference librarian, as an assistant chief librarian, you walk in the shoes of Dorothy Porter Wesley. Now, imagine you've met her a few times, worked with her. I wanted to hear about your personal experiences with her, with learning her contributions to the field, with seeing the evidence of her work in this space. Just speak about Dorothy Porter Wesley for a little bit.
Oh, wow. As I said, Dorothy had, since I wrote about her, she became a first name basis with me, but that's just out of respect now too. Dorothy retired the year before I came here, but she was around. So I got to see her quite a bit, not only in Moorland-Spingarn, but also outside. Those of us that were doing research, especially those of us that were doing research in Black women's history, she was very, very supportive of us. So she always made sure that as we were doing research, that she would come to our programs, and she would
she just made sure that she was around to help us, and that was with pretty much everybody. If you were doing some research and Dorothy Porter, you came to Dorothy Porter, and I have a few references in the book of people that she helped while she was here at the center. She just was very, very, very instrumental in helping people. For instance, a friend of mine, Ruby Sales, and I, we had this program that we call At Home. And of course, as you know, before we could go into hotels and stuff, people met at people's houses. So so that's what we started. We started this thing called At Homes that was with elder women. And we had women that were coming from out of town. And I, to this day, think that Dorothy Porter paid those ladies to come. Ruby and I had just enough money to do a reception, a little food in the back, and we didn't have any money to get those people out of New York or Philadelphia, where they were coming from. So to this day, I just believe that Dorothy Porter paid those ladies ways to come and talk with us.
Were these people who were giving you consultation about the field, or who, when you say these ladies, are these researchers or these fellow librarians?
They were just ordinary people. One was Elizabeth Carnegie, who was with she was a nurse, so we had her to come. But the most special person that we had come was Jean Blackwell Hudson from the Schomburg. And so we had her that evening and had a little reception and everything. And so Dorothy invited Ruby, myself, and Jean over to her house the next day for lunch. Now, mind you, Dorothy Porter was not only a researcher, she was a good homemaker. She could cook like nobody's business, and she was a good seamstress. So she had us over for lunch that day. And you talk about being in librarian heaven. To sit there between Dorothy Porter, Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, Jean Blackwell Hudson, Schomburg Center, I was in library heaven to hear them talk about how they developed these collections. So it was just marvelous. So again, Dorothy was one of those people that would really go out of the way. Like, for instance, the late Rosalind Turbarg Penn, Sharon Harley, when they did their book, she gave them a book party. So she was just one of those people that was really very helpful to you if you were doing research. So that was one of the things that I remember most about her.
Now, before we get to her classification system, which most people feel like is her largest contribution, her biggest legacy, we have Moorland-Spingarn Research Center scholars, our undergraduates and graduate students who work as interns at Moorland-Spingarn Research Center. Raise your hand if you are an MSRC scholar, please.
All right now.
Thank you. And so one of the things I shared with the group that I'm in charge of, or the group that looked to me for guidance and support, is Dorothy Porter's report, one of her reports from her trips to Africa. And so she had been to several places during this trip, and then also stopped over in London and Paris. But she was talking about, in this report, she was reporting about how she would make connections with librarians and scholars and other folks on the continent, in Ghana and all these places, and what she would bring, and she would list what she brought back.
Yes.
And then she would show the existing relationships that continue, that she built between these people. And I think that they were profoundly affected by learning how our collection, that part of how our collection was created, that she would actually go.
Yes.
And so speak a little bit about that, and then I want to talk about the classification system.
Okay, yes, Dorothy traveled quite a bit, and of course, she also traveled with her husband, James Porter, who was a chair of the art department, and we just did the James Porter colloquium this past Saturday. So they traveled quite a bit. So she was able to, as she was traveling in these different countries, to make these connections and to bring materials back to the center. So that is one way that we have a lot of the materials that we have, was because of the fact that she was able to bring things back from other countries. Also, she worked with Carter G. Woodson. And that little story is that, when she came here in 1928, she was first came as a cataloger. And then, of course, in 1930s, when Dr. Mordecai Johnson made her the curator of what they called then the Negro collection. but she knew little about Black history. So she went to see Carter G. Woodson, the founder of the Association for the Study of that, at that time, it was Negro Life and History. It's African American Life and History now. And so they became fast friends. And of course, when he got materials, he would also bring some of them, especially African newspapers and things like that. He would also share those with her. And one of the things that she would do, especially during Black History Month, she would go out into the community. Now, Carter G. Woodson was sort of a quiet person that sort of, stayed back and worked. But she was the one that was going out in the community, talking about and taking these materials to the different schools and libraries so that people would know about Black history and about the theme every year for Black history.
So when you say materials, and I'm gonna get to the classification system real quick, but you say materials, you just mentioned newspapers, books, journals,
postcards. I mean, she collected everything because she felt like that all of it told our history. It wasn't just books and magazines. It was like, for instance, if we were doing this program, if we had the program for today's program, she would collect things like that. So what she wanted to do was to collect all kinds of materials to show our history.
Art,
drums, yes. A lot of the artifacts that we had in the museum,
I just want to
came
clarify.
from her travels and things of that nature. She collected everything.
I wanted to hear you say it.
Yeah. She collected everything. That is why we have so much material here. And as I always tell people, anyone that was doing research, especially if you're doing research in Black history or something, and you were doing a book or something, you pretty much had to come to Moorland-Spingarn Research Center. She helped everybody. You name it, John Hope Franklin, for instance, Benjamin Quarles, Darlene Clark Hine. All the scholars basically came here to do their research. So, and again, she was extremely helpful to people that were trying to get the research out there because, that time, there wasn't, like you said, there wasn't Google. So, so it was up to, she felt it was her responsibility to make sure that these materials were available to people.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about that, if you describe or talk about the classification system and the impact that has had on the field and Moorland-Spingarn.
I'm going to read something.
Yes, ma'am.
Aubrey Madison, who was the oral history librarian here, interviewed Dorothy Porter, and one of the questions that she asked her was about about why she felt the need to modify the Dewey system. And this is her answer. She says, well, the problem was this. We always looked to the Library of Congress for guidance and to libraries that use a system called a Dewey Decimal System. Now, in the Dewey Decimal System, they had one number, 326. That meant slavery. And they had one other number, 325, as I recall it. That meant colonization. So all the libraries, many of the white libraries, which I visited later, every book where it was a book of whether it was a book of poems by James Weldon Johnson, who everybody knew was a Black poet, went under 325. And that was stupid to me. Why not take the whole Dewey Decimal System and put a book by James Weldon Johnson, the poet, underneath the number for poetry? So that's what I did. I did adapt the whole system, the whole collection, according to what the subject was. Now, if I had books on slavery, which I did, and books on colonization, which I did, then I put them under those numbers. But then I made separate numbers for the authors also. The authors had their own numbers so that you wouldn't be all mixed up with all of this. You bring together all the books that one man had written, say on slavery, but it was a very simple thing. It wasn't difficult to do. So she felt that was, and of course, that's the way I think it should have been. A book on art should not have been under slavery. A book on medicine should not have been under slavery. So that was her reason for doing this. She wanted to make sure that if it was a subject area, it was put under that particular subject area.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm not going to get too deep into it because I know Dr. Matthews wants to give his perspective on that as well. Now, bringing up Dr. Matthews, You are his mentor, one of them. He has many mentors, as many of us do. And so I feel like Dr. Matthews is my mentor. He was archivist directly before I was, before he became the digital productions manager here. And so I walk in his shoes, he walks in your shoes,
Right.
you walk in Dorothy Porter Wesley's
Right.
shoes. And so this is very personal and important to me that we
Me
have
too.
programs like this. So I really thank you for your time. And if you please talk about a little bit about your mentorship as a librarian and an art in this field, your mentorship specifically of Dr. Matthews, and then introduce him to the crowd so he can bless us today with his perspective.
Well, of course, I met, I'm going to just say Lopez, that, and by the way, he's my adopted son. So not just a colleague, but my son. When he came to work in the manuscript division at Moorland-Spingarn, and then, of course, he went away for a few years and then came back a few years later and worked in University Archives, and then, of course, became the manager later on of the Digital Production Center. So he's had a very varied career here at Moorland-Spingarn Research Center. But I also know him from our work with Asala. We both served on executive council. We also worked on several committees. He specifically worked with Asala TV, the publications committee, think marketing. He worked on. I worked in marketing. So we've had a long time relationship. But then we also worked together as state commissioners for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. So one of the things that organization did, we went around the state of Maryland, not only having our meetings, but also having programs across the state. So sometimes we'd be in Southern Maryland, sometimes we'd be on the Eastern Shore, sometimes we'd be in Western Maryland. So we went around the state doing programs in African American history. So we have worked together for several years, and I am so very proud of the work that he is doing. Every time I see something about him on on Facebook or when he posts about what he's doing, it brings a smile to my face when I see the people that not only I mentored, but like you mentoring people, to see them doing well and to see them doing things that a lot of times, Dorothy Porter would be so very proud because during her time, she wouldn't have been able to do anything like this, So it's very proud. And when I came over the last time and I saw the students working in the various departments, it made me so very proud to see them different from not just from history, but from all of the different subject areas here, from disciplines here on the campus, and to know that they're going to go out and do some good things in the world. So, I mean, I guess for me as an elder, to see our young people doing well, doing things, and just being someone that they hopefully will become mentors as well to other students. I always talk about a young lady that came up from the University of North Carolina library school, and she came here. She just came here one summer, and she wanted to do just an internship with us, and because she said that she didn't think she was going to stay in the field of library science. So when she came that summer, I had her work. She worked under me, so I had her work in every department that we had. So she spent at least a week or two with everybody. So she ended up staying in the field and ended up working for the American Library Association. So so things like that really, and to see people that really just are doing wonderful things in this field. So I'm just so very, very proud of Lopez and what he is doing.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody has enjoyed that and taken a little piece of it at least with you, and put it in your heart and your mind and your soul and move with it. Please introduce your son to the audience.
Well, as I said earlier, my son has you see his bio is already in the program. So I was going to do that, but since it's already written, I'll let you read that. But again, he has just been, the work that he has done, especially digitization. I know that Dorothy Porter, because with all those newspapers that we used to get and Of course, we put some on microfilm ourselves here in the center, and of course, we got some from the Library of Congress and other places. But to see those newspapers being digitized now so that they can be available, because as you know, paper yellows, crackles, and just disintegrates eventually. So to have them digitized is just a wonderful tool that we have to work with now. So for future generations doing research, it changes the trajectory of them, being able to do research. So a lot of times you don't have the funds to travel everywhere to do research because no one collection has it all. So digitization really makes it possible to do research. And those newspapers, I was telling a young lady this morning about doing research in those newspapers. When I was doing research, I'd get a newspaper and start looking at it, and then it was something that about the local news that I would start reading, and I'd forget all about the project I was working on and start reading something else. So it just brings you a wealth of knowledge. And so I'm just so very proud of the fact that as he became the manager of the Digital Production Center, that he's been able, and especially also doing digitizing the materials from Howard University, the yearbooks
Yes.
and things of that nature, that people will be used for generations to come. And Lopez, I'm very, very proud of you, son.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll take that. Thank you so much. Go back to Tom.
Hey, and as you can see, I did mine from paper. He's doing his from, so you can see the generation differences.
Thank you so much, Sonia and Dan. It's a tough act to follow. I don't know. Can you all hear me? Yes. All right, cool. Because I have been known to speak low. So I always tell people before I start, if I start to speak low, just go and I'll speak up. So the theme for National Library Week is there is more to the story, librarianship in the 21st century. And so my talk for today is about my story, but it's also about the state of Black librarianship overall. Because I think that for those of you who are interested in the field and interested in what it looks like, you have to have some background. And so I'm just going to start with some statistics on librarianship. Now, as you can see on the screen, 68.7% of librarians are women. 31% are men. So as a Black male in this field, rare. I was at a program about 3 or 4 years ago, and a young man came up to me who wanted to be an archivist. And he said, "I just had to see you." And I was like, "What you mean?" Because somebody run up on you in the street, you're like, "Wait a minute, what you running up on me for?" And he said, "I just had to see you because I've never met a Black male archivist before. And so I just had to see you to see that you were real." And I was like, "Oh, well, hey, how you doing?" I just softened up a little bit. I'm like, "Okay, you're not crazy." But I just had to understand, like, wow, I'd never thought of that, because I've been in Black spaces, and I'll tell you all my story later, but I've kind of kept myself in Black spaces, so I've always seen Black people in spaces. Like I went to Coppin State undergrad, I'll tell you about that. I went to Howard for grad school. So being in these spaces, it never really occurred to me that you could be in a space where you would not see someone who looked like you doing what you wanted to do. But that is the case for a lot of people in librarianship. So most librarians are women. Then when you look at the race of librarians, 77% of librarians are white. 7.7% are Hispanic or Latino, 6.4% are Black or African American, 4.9% are Asian, 3.6% are unknown. Those are the people who don't check the box on the survey. And then American Indian and Alaska Natives are 0.3%. So this profession is overwhelmingly white. And that informs the way information is stored, that informs the way information is presented. And so sometimes it makes it, what is important to you? That's why you need to have a diverse field, because different people have different ideologies on what is important. Because you approach the field differently. You approach history differently. Something that's important to you as a Black person, and I use the term Black instead of African American because, African American is for those who are descendants of slaves here in the United States, but the entire Black experience, because that's what Moorland focuses on, you may have a different idea on what is important. And if you aren't there in the room to say this is important, it won't be there. I always tell people that archivists see the information before the historians see it. So, and the historians are the ones who write the books that you read and you learn from. So if the archivist didn't preserve these documents, the historian will never see it, and this story will never make it in the book that you read, so you'll never know that it happened. And so that's why you need to be there at the beginning of the process to make sure that history is preserved. Now, even the wage gap, which supports why the numbers are sometimes skewed when you look at race and you look at gender, to make $66,000 a year as a librarian. This is in 2021, mind you. You need to have a doctorate degree to get up close to 68,000. Now, let me tell you something. That ain't a lot of money to have gotten a PhD. Now, you spend all this money to get a PhD. Now, I went to Howard University. It's not cheap to get your PhD at Howard University. But there I was with my doctorate working as a librarian. Now, you have to navigate yourself to make more than that. I make much more than that now, I'll tell you. So, but, you just have to navigate yourself. You just got to move in certain spaces. So I tell young people, negotiate and be willing to walk away. Because, avowed poverty is still poverty. Support my people, but still eat. Let me tell you. So this goes into why you don't really see a large amount of diversity, particularly in this field. And they also say, if you're going to be a librarian, marry someone who's actually going to make money. Marry a lawyer, marry a doctor, somebody who's going to make money so you can live well. But there are ways around that. There are ways you can make money. Don't let that discourage you. Like I said, there are places who do actually pay you a valid wage. You just got to go there. Now, as today's theme is librarianship in the 21st century, and I think I changed this order, and the reason will come back to me in a minute. One of the things that is changing librarianship today is technology, because technology is democratizing access to information. That is one of the biggest benefits of having ebooks and having digitization, because now you don't have to go pay thousands of dollars to travel to an archive in France to see documents that you need to see. You don't have to fly up to New York to see documents that you need that are at the Schomburg, because more than likely it may be digitized, or at least part of it may be digitized. And so you now have ebooks and you have digitization. And the biggest benefit is that it democratizes information. More people have access to it. But the problem that I see with it, and this is as a digital archivist, is that it almost Google-fies, I made up this word, Google-fication, of research. So now all of a sudden people think everything should be available at the drop of a hat. I should be able to type this in like Google and find everything I need. But no, you still need to do research. So digitization is just the surface level, because a lot of information, okay, now I found this document, okay, now I need to go see the rest of the documents that are connected to this. And so it just gives you a peek. Because digitization is very expensive. It's very time consuming. And not everything is going to be digitized. Just some documents just can't be digitized. There's a fantastic book in Moorland-Spingarn about the founding of the country of Liberia. How many of you in here knew the country of Liberia was founded by freed African Americans? Few of you knew it. There is a book that details that process in the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center from the 1700s. Great book. Started to digitize it, but it is very fragile, so it cannot be digitized on a scanner. It has to be digitized very carefully, very carefully. So you have to do it in a different way. And eventually it was like, okay, this is taking a lot, so we just gonna put this book right back on the shelf. And now finish this. Because the book isn't suited for digitization. You either digitize it and destroy it, or you preserve it and just let people, when they come, take your time, look at it carefully. I err on the side of preserving the document, not destroying the document. There's some people who say, "Oh, just destroy it. You have a digital copy." Beware of those folks, but they are out there. So not everything can be digitized, So it creates an oversimplification of the job that we do as librarians. It is a specialized field. It does take specialized training, and it does take experience, which is also why sometimes people don't hang in there, because it does take, you need experience to really understand. You can get knowledge in the books, you can learn all the theory, but you really don't know what you're doing until you've worked in the field for a number of years. And then you say, oh, okay, now it makes sense of why this wasn't done this way. Like, I always tell people to never criticize their predecessors when they go into a new position, because you never know what they had to deal with and why something is the way it is. Why did they have to do it this way? And then eventually you'll learn why they had to do it that way, because the system is wonky. It's not perfect like in a book. So you have to adjust yourself to your situation. And that's why we talk about Black representation in archives. Because when places like Moorland-Spingarn were started, Black history and the Black experience wasn't valued. There were people or had no history worth studying. But they understood that that was not true. And so you had someone like Dorthy Porter come to Howard University. Howard University started an MLS program in the late 1900s. Not late 1900s, late 1910s. What do you call it when it's like 1905 to 1910?
12.
Yeah. They started it between 1905 and 1910, a library school, to train African Americans in librarianship. Now, they said in the catalog that, and it's on Digital Howard, so you can read it, I'm telling you the truth. They said, we're starting this program because people seem to demand it. They didn't even really care. The university leadership didn't care. But they started it because they said, for some reason, people want Black librarians. But they did this because they understood that you needed to have people of that culture in this space to preserve their history, because they'll understand things that are important. So they start to train Black librarians here at Howard to send out, to fan out into these libraries. It's kind of the same thing when they brought up the history department, where Howard's history department has trained Black historians, Black archivists, and now we are all around the country. If you look at, I did a lecture where I talked about Howard and archives, and I did a listing of just the 20 archivists that I know who graduated from Howard that are in various institutions all around this country, preserving Black history. I'm like, oh, did you know they were there? They're here, they're here, they're here. Everywhere, even if you don't know they're a Howard person, we know each other because we all support each other. Even if you don't know we're supporting each other. We'll call each other up, hey, I need this. And they're like, oh, okay, here's what you do. But don't tell anybody I told you how to do it. Act like you knew how to do it. So, and that's why we always champion Dorthy Porter, because she is kind of the shining example of that. As Jan mentioned, she developed her classification system. That was revolutionary, because even people at Howard didn't want her to do that. I have a quote myself from Dorthy Porter. That's why I had to check to see if Jan was going to read my quote when she told me she was going to quote her. I'm like, wait a minute, we're thinking too much alike here. But she said, the woman in charge of the Dewey Decimal Classification at Howard couldn't see why I wanted to develop something else, why I didn't want to put a book of poetry by James Weldon Johnson under 325 or 326, which was ridiculous. she said, the Black experience is more than just slavery and colonization. You can't just bottle it up like that. You have to show the true nature of our experience. And so she created her own classification system. Today, in librarianship, people are doing what they call reparative description and reparative work to try to talk about the erasures in archives and erasures in libraries. But they don't really have that. They didn't have that here because Dorthy Porter developed her own classification system, and I'm happy to say that the books that she brought in are still in that classification system, so you can still see it. And she showed the diversity of the Black experience. And so when you talk about erasures and silences, you don't really see that in Black archives because they understood their importance. Like I see a lot of discussion about the lack of collections related to Black women in archives in general. And people will bring that up. And then you say, but wait, in places like Howard at Moorland-Spingarn, Schomburg, there are collections related to Black women. There are many collections related to Black women. And they'll say, oh, we're not talking about that. Why not? These are respected institutions in the field that are preserving the history. And just because you don't want to acknowledge the importance of the work they did, we'll acknowledge our own importance and our own work that we've done. We don't need you to validate what we've done because we understand that it's important. And so that's why whenever I speak about the field and I speak about the work of librarians, I always lift up Dorthy Porter because of the importance of what she did. Because she did this with herself being the only full-time employee and 4 students. When she started, it was just her in the Moorland Foundation or in the Moorland Collection and 4 student workers for years before she got a staff. And then before it became Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, which it is today. So just think about that. She built this incredible collection, one of the largest archival collections on the Black experience in the world. They talk about the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They have a large museum collection, but Moorland-Spingarn has a larger archival collection. So keep that in mind, because we've been around longer, and we've had the time, and we cared about Black history. Dorthy Porter was known as a bag lady because she would show up at someone's funeral and be like, hey, I know y'all are sad and I know y'all are crying, but let me go in here and take these documents before y'all throw it in the trash. And she'd carry her own trash bags, yeah, I got it. Or wait till they threw it in the trash and say, okay, don't throw it in the trash. Because once something hits the trash, ownership is gone. So go and throw it in the trash, I'll wait. And then they throw it in the trash, you go right in that trash can, this is mine now. So keep that in mind, don't throw nothing away if you don't want to give away ownership of it. But that is the work that they did, and they took a long time to get recognition. It took a long time for Black history, Black librarians, Black archivists to get recognition. And that's why I have archives and libraries, because archives and libraries are 2 different types of institutions. Archives like to keep things and protect them and hold them away, while libraries are open and they say, oh, just walk on the shelf and pull it off and take a look. And, it's more for browsing, while archives are more for specific research and they try to protect it. So I do like to mention that just to give people, they're 2 different perspectives. They look at them like they're the same, but there are subtle differences in an archive. And so Dorthy Porter was doing 2 things. She was doing the library work, so you come in and browse and find this history, but she was doing the archival work too, so that you could come in and do targeted research. Now, part of what I was asked to do was talk about. And I do want to bring up how I became interested in archives. I was born in Baltimore. I was born in, I don't know if any of you know anything about Baltimore, but I was born in a neighborhood called Park Heights. And in the shadow of, I think it's called Dietz and Watson now. It used to be called Park Sausage. Not the nicest neighborhood, I'll say that. Not the nicest neighborhood. But So I went to Coppin State University, which is a small HBCU in Baltimore. One of our professors, as a side note, the entire history department at that time of Coppin State graduated from Howard University. So just in case you wonder how I got to Howard University, the entire history department graduated from Howard. So I was there. I did a research project with one of the professors. We went to the National Archives, and I held a document from the Freedmen's Bureau records. And it dawned on me that, wow, I'm holding a document that's over 100 years old. I didn't think you could ever hold a document that old. It had never occurred to me that documents that old, that you could just touch them, that you could see them. So I was like, wow, you know, this is so fascinating to me. And so I said then, well, I skipped ahead. I went to school, I wanted to be a computer science major. Realized I can't do math, so that was done. So I said, what else do I like? I like history, so I said, I'll study history. Didn't know what I would do with history, but I said I would study history. So then I did that research project at NARA, decided, wow, I love the idea of holding records. Everyone else should know about this too, because I figured if I didn't know about it, there were a lot of other people who didn't know you could do that either. So from then, I decided I wanted to work in archives, work with records. As I told you, everyone in that department graduated from Howard. So then they said, oh, you want to do this, then you need to talk to Elizabeth Clark Lewis at Howard University. They connected me with her. She said, oh yeah, so you're gonna come to Howard. Excited. So I said, all right, I'm going to Howard. Got an internship at the Maryland State Archives. Came to Howard my first semester. They told me I had some money. Got to Howard, didn't have the money. Went and said, look, y'all told me I had this, I'm here. What we gonna do? So they worked it out. You know, that's the Howard of old, they work things out, you know, shuffle some things. And so I came here with the full support of the faculty at Coppin, because it really is about mentorship and relationships. That is something that I have learned about the field of archives. It is about relationships. We support each other, we stick together, we help each other. That's what I got from Coppin. They supported me in coming here. They still support me, call me at least once a week. I'm talking to one of them. And I graduated from Coppin almost 20 years ago. And still once a week I hear from one of those professors in that department. So they built a relationship here at Howard. I came here, met people here, came to Moorland-Spingarn. As you said, met Jan, met Will Logan, met some of the great people who worked there, and they were like a family as well. As Jan mentioned, they used to close at 1 o'clock every day for lunch. So when they closed, we all ate together in the break room. And you learned everybody had their seat, and you didn't sit in their seat. So we always joked they had their assigned seats, because they would tell you the seats weren't assigned. But if you sat in somebody's seat, you would know you sat in their seat, so you just got up and moved. So it was like a family, and they supported you, they poured into you, they trained you, they connected you with other people who were doing the same work, because you realized they all knew each other because there were only so many Black people in this field. There are only so many. So you don't have enough of it to be like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. You know, it's like, look, I'm gonna sit with you. So we all worked together, and you had that mentorship. They supported, they said, oh, you need to talk to this person. You need to go to this conference. We will pay for you to go to this conference. People paid out of their pocket for students to attend programs. They would take us with them to attend programs, to help develop you, to help support you. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History. You build connections there because they were all a part of that organization. So they say, okay, we're going to this event. We're going to this conference with Asala. You go there, you meet other people. Oh, you're doing this? I'm doing this too. Oh, you're doing this? This person is doing this. So they'll connect you with that person to support you doing your research. You support other people doing their research. Oh yeah, you know, we have this collection. Oh yeah, we have this collection over here. And you work together. Now, I say the same thing with the Park Service. Howard has a deep connection with the National Park Service. Bethune House is around the corner. Frederick Douglass Home is in Anacostia. They're about to open the Carter G. Woodson Home down the road on Rhode Island. The connections are there, we work together, we share the history, you learn, you get those experiences. And that's something that you get here at Howard, and that's the legacy of people like Dorothy Porter. And so I skipped over how I became a digital librarian. So even though I want to work with records, I still have my interest in working with computers. And so after I graduated with my PhD, I went to work at the National Archives. And while at the National Archives, I was able to do a detail in electronic records and really able to learn how you can use history, how you can use records and connect it to computers. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is how you connect it to computers. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. So then when I came back to Howard to become an archivist in the university archives, which I was excited when the position opened, because I'm like, oh, I can go back to my people. Leave National Archives, which, it's a great place. But, it's not Moorland. It doesn't have the collection that they have at Moorland-Spingarn. Because if you are interested in studying Black history, there is no better collection. I like Black history. So I said, oh, a space open in Moorland, I can go back and work with that Black history. So I went back, or came back to Howard, and worked as an archivist in the university archives. And then an opportunity opened to start the digital program for Moorland. And I'm like, wait, that fits into what I always said I wanted to do. I always wanted to expand access to archival records. Because remember, when I went to NARA, held that document, I said, wow, I wish more people could see this. And so I saw that as an opportunity to bring what I decided I wanted to do when I was a sophomore in undergrad to fruition now that I was a professional. This was maybe 12 years later. I'm like, oh, okay, this gives me the opportunity to provide that access that I always said I wanted to do. And so I got the job as the digital production librarian / manager of the Digital Production Center at Howard. Started with our first digital collection, built the digital repository, started, building workflows and, okay, how are we gonna digitize this? How are we gonna digitize that? The perpetual motion of where's this money gonna come from? So, you have to be creative in how you fund things. Sometimes you have to call people and say, hey, I need your help. Like the Hilltop. The first portion of the Hilltop, if you go on Digital Howard, you will see the name Paul Cotton on there. And the name Paul Cotton are on all of those documents because I was trying to figure out how we could digitize the Hilltop. I talked to Paul Cotton, and I said, we want to digitize the Hilltop. Don't you think it's great? He's like, that would be awesome to have the Hilltop digitized. And so we talked a little bit more, and he said, well, how much is it going to cost? And I told him how much it was going to cost. And he said, well, why don't I just pay for it? And so he just paid for it because he cared about the institution, and he cared about that history, and he wanted it to be available. And so, he paid to have that portion digitized. That's why when you see that, you'll see his name on all of them. I said, well, what I will do is, I'll make sure that your name is on there so that your contribution is always recognized. And so that is one of the things that being at Howard taught me, to be resourceful, to be able to pivot, to be able to roll with the punches. And that has benefited me in my new position as the State Archivist of DC. In this position, I'm also the official historian of DC. So it's a much larger collection, about 200,000 linear feet in our collection. In case you can't really put that together in your minds, the building that we're building now will be the second largest state archive in the country, just so you know. Now, I'm saying state archive, and you're like, wait, DC isn't a state. But we're prepared for DC statehood, so we don't call this a state. But that's just how you understand the size of the collection. And it has really served me in this position so far. And I am still excited about the things I see happening at Howard. You know, even though I'm not here to see it come to fruition, the Black Press Archive Digitization Project, led by the great Brandon Nightingale back there, is exciting. You know, every time I see a post about it, it makes me feel good because I see that, you know, the work is continuing, that the history that is in Moorland-Spingarn is still being made available to people and is moving to new heights. I mean, walking in this room, seeing this is amazing to me. You know, I love Howard. I am a son of Howard. So I love to see the development. I love to see the progression. And that is something that being at Howard and being at Moorland-Spingarn has taught me, that we are not in competition with one another. We are all in this together to preserve this history. You know, I could get a phone call from another institution today. How did you do this? Here's how I did it, and here are the instructions on how I did it. Now put your name on it and say it's yours. I've done that for at least 3 separate institutions. They'll call and they say, oh, how did you do that? How did you get this? Here's the document. Take my name off, put your name on top and say it's yours. Have a good day. Now you know what to do too. You know, and that's what we do, because I've called people. I just did it today. Hey, I need to do this. You've done this. How did you do this? Oh, here's our copy. Here's our information. You can take it. Thank you very much. Took their name off, put mine on, put our stuff on top, and now we have it too. You know, because that's how we support each other, and that's how we help each other. And so I will say, as I bring this to a close, we need diverse voices in the library, in the archival field, because you have people who will misrepresent what is happening. Like people are discussing critical race theory, and I think critical race theory is a great example of how people can twist something and turn it into something that it is not. Critical race theory is a legal theory, but they're using that as a catch-all to talk about teaching Black history. I saw a clip the other day of Condoleezza Rice talking about her life and saying that critical race theory discounts her life. But I thought to myself, this is so hilarious. See, they tried to tell me, stop. But I'll end it, but I will say, she told her story of being a Black woman coming out of segregated Alabama and having to overcome that experience and being able to overcome that experience. And I said, oh, isn't that funny? Critical race theory explains that you had to overcome that to be successful. That's the whole point of critical race theory. So thank you for using your life as a perfect example of what they're teaching. But they didn't make that connection, that she actually is a walking example of what critical race theory is. And so you have people using that to ban books. And then you have what I see as friendly fire, where you have those who are your friend, and they say, oh, we'll work with you. We'll help you do what you're trying to do. But they aren't really trying to help you. They're trying to extract from you to build themselves up, and then they'll leave the husk that is you behind, because now they've extracted all of your knowledge and moved on. So I will leave you with, realize that you have to protect your history, but you also have to protect your institutions. I was very protective of Moorland while I was here, because I would always read the terms of any kind of agreement coming our way. And so I say that to you as you move in the field. If anyone, especially anyone, wants to move into librarianship, always read the terms. Don't read the website. Read the terms that you are agreeing to, because you'll read it and the website will look good, but in the terms I have you, they say the devil's in the details, and it really is. So I leave you with that, because you have those who are saying they're trying to help you, but they're really diluting you. Oh, it's gone. They're really diluting you. If you could see my PowerPoint, you would see I have diluted the issues, because there is an effort to kind of combine all people of color into one pot and say all our issues are the same. But all our issues are not the same, and they need to be examined individually. Like my issues as a Black person are not the same issues that someone who is Asian American faces. And so their issues need to be discussed. My issues as a Black American need to be discussed. Someone else's issues as a Latino American need to be discussed. And so the melting pot of it all dilutes your specific issues. And so there are those who will then say, well, it leads to those who don't know your experience trying to tell you your own experience. And then you're like, well, this is my experience. And they'll say, oh, no. This is your experience because I read it here. But no, I have a lived experience. No, that's not your experience. I've seen that happen, particularly in this field. So protect your history, protect your institutions that have always understood the value of your history, like our HBCUs and our HBCU archives. Support them every way you can. So I will end with that. And I see one of my current students at the DC Archives in the back, Micah. So she's working with me. And one of my former students in the front here, Zoe. She's doing great. So good to see you. So Dr. Miller, or
No, you're good. So thank you so much, Lopez. You know we have to So I think we have time for a few Q&A, a few questions and a few answers. If anybody has a question, does anybody have a question or comment? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Watkins.
Hello, my name is Camille Ross. I'm a junior history major, math minor from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And my question is regarding, in an age where media literacy across so many different forms is necessary, and considering that libraries are usually centers for creating literacy, what do you see as your role as an archivist and as a librarian in creating programs that allow people to navigate resources well?
I think that, oh, you want me to go back up?
Please, sir.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
So I think that our role, particularly as archivists, is to curate collections that speak to what people need to learn. Create guides, create digital collections that guide you to resources that will help you and resources that will support you. Like I mentioned, the Black Press Archive Project. That's gonna bring the stories of local Black communities to the world. Because a lot of those newspapers, the only place they exist are here at Moorland-Spingarn. And they aren't big national newspapers. They're local newspapers that tell local stories and local histories. So you can find out what happened at your local tavern on a Saturday night, and you can search it and you will see it. And so I think that that is our role, to help guide people to the resources so that they can then learn what's in these places. Because if you don't know,
Don't let me interrupt.
if you don't know what to look for, then you'll never find it. You might think you know what to look for, but they always say you don't know what you don't know till you learn that you don't know it. And that's very true. When I used to go to the library, I find a book, and I go, oh, this is really interesting. I want to know more about this. So I just pull every book next to it, because they're all related to the same topic. But most people don't know you can do that. They think, oh, I'm gonna go pull this book off. Oh, this is the book. And they don't realize that all the books around it are on that same topic and can give you different perspectives and different knowledge. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to create guides and resources and collections to help kind of direct people. I think that answered your question. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, thank you so much for your remarks. I really enjoyed hearing all that you had to share. Something that I'm curious about, having worked in Moorland for this year, I'm recognizing all the resources there. Being that you've been in so many different spaces with all of this Black history and culture, is there like a resource or a document or a text that you're like, everyone should know about this, everyone should access this at least once? I'm very curious to know from your perspective if there's anything maybe even within MSRC or any of the other spaces that you've been in that you feel like more people should try to access?
You know, as you were saying that, I thought of a book, but I will say the book, but I'll tell you what my real answer when you talk about what's in Moorland. So I will say the book, The African American Odyssey by Darlene Clark Hine. It's a textbook, but it gives you a great overview of the Black experience in America. Fantastic overview. It's a textbook, but it's an easy read and it gets to the point. Now, if you talk about a collection, the vertical files in Moorland-Spingarn are amazing. And most people don't even think to look at them, but they are incredible. I developed an exhibit on the Association for the Study of African American Life and History at 100. The material is in the vertical file. Material that's nowhere else is in that vertical file. The Carter G. Woodson home, where they get material for their exhibit, the vertical file, because it's nowhere else. And so that is an amazing resource of just general history. Because it's not, you know, a book, it's not primary documents, it's newspaper clippings, it's pamphlets, it's anything related to that subject, because it's broken down by subject. Just an amazing resource that I don't think people even really think about in terms of doing general research.
Name some of the subjects for them, the vertical file subjects.
Oh goodness, now you put me on the spot.
I'm so sorry.
But they do have a file on
Riots,
they have
lynching.
A file on riot. Yeah, they have a file on riots, they have a file on lynching.
Churches.
Protests, specific churches, specific people, individuals. Stokely Carmichael, Martin Luther King, Marcus Garvey. If any major figure, they have a file on him. They say, oh, I see this, let me put this in the file. Oh, I got this, let me put this in the file. And once you know it's there, then you start adding to the file. You'll go somewhere and be like, oh, I got this document about this person. Let me put it in the vertical file. I know I used to do that. I sort of be like, oh, I went to this program about this person. Here it is, go put it in the vertical file. So that people who are researching this topic can learn that history, you know?
Hi, I want to thank you for your remarks today, and I actually got to see you at the HBCU Library Alliance talk, where you did a fantastic job there as well. I'm the Rare Books librarian here at the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center.
Awesome.
Yes, it is. And I just want to ask you, what is some advice that you could give to early career librarians that could kind of help them in this field, like today with all the digitization and all the different efforts?
I would say go to webinars, go to training programs, continue to develop your skills, continue to expand your skills, because you never know when it might be useful to you. You know, there are all kinds of free webinars around. Oh, okay, let me go to this program and let me learn about what they're doing on this project. Let me learn about what they're doing on this project and write it down, because you never know when you might need that knowledge. So that's my recommendation. And meet people. We are a very solitary profession. We like to sit in our corner and, I know, I'm gonna sit here with my records. But go out every once in a while, meet like-minded people. Realize everybody in that room don't want to sit with you either, but we sitting there together, so we gonna sit here. So meet people, connect with people, and that's why I go to the Asala conference to this day, because that's where I meet people, see what people are doing. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Then you learn them, then you learn what's happening, and you stay, updated. So that's what I say, go to these webinars, go to these programs. Now, especially now that everything's online, it's so much easier to go. And organizations are offering a lot of free programs, so.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm gonna get this young lady first and then go to Nightingale.
Hi, I am Yasmin Greer. I'm a senior with the Black Art Press Archives. I'm an intern. I'm on my way out, but I'm actually from Baltimore, so it's nice to have some representation in the room. But I have a question specific to this campus and this institution. I've been here for 4 years. And you mentioned increasing access so that people can access historical documents and things like that. But an issue I've found is that there's a lack of awareness. Like on Howard's campus, we can access these documents, but we don't even know they're here. I had a project last year. I had to write a paper on an important Black scholar, and my professor was like, oh, go to Moorland. Her thesis is in there. And I was like, what do you mean her thesis is in there? And then I came and I was able to read her thesis from back in 1930 something. And that's not stuff that we know we can do. So I guess I am asking how you think structurally we can increase awareness on campus that we have access to these things through the digital repository, but also in person here.
That is a complex issue. It's something that we have been working on for at least 20 years. So, because the same issue that you had is the same issue we were talking about when I first got here. People are like, oh, I didn't know Moorland-Spingarn is over there. They just don't know. And I think partly because people don't necessarily focus on history until they have something specific they want to look at. And so they'll just mention it, oh yeah, we have the library and we have Moorland-Spingarn. And then it moves on and it just floats away because you have no reason to come over. It's not the focal point, it's not STEM. So it's not, the sexy thing with the, all the grants and all this stuff floating in all the time. History isn't the hot topic unless it's something controversial. And so, unless your professor encourages you to come over here, you won't know it's here. And so I think that's really where it starts, with the faculty. Getting the faculty to realize that they need to encourage their students to at least look at the digital repository. Because you probably don't have the capacity for them to send a whole class over here all the time. But they could send them to the digital repository and say, look at the digital repository, find something, tell me about it. Tell me what you can learn about it. I don't teach at Howard, but I send my students to use the digital repository all the time. I say, here's a link to what I want you to look at. Find something on there, read it, and tell me what you think about it. I'll send them right link to Digital Howard. Oh, you going to Howard? Yep, we're going right to Howard. I want you to use that collection and tell me what you think. And so I think it's really it's going to be up to the professors to really integrate it into the classrooms. That's how students are going to know. Because I think Moorland has done all it can for its part.
Thank you.
That's my opinion.
Dr. Matthews, good to see you. I really enjoyed the presentation. My question is, as we move into the future, the digitization and everything is great. I'm specifically thinking about AI and artificial intelligence, and where that places Black institutions, Black archives. Somebody in your position, what are your thoughts just overall as far as where we will be in the future when it comes to AI and all that kind of stuff?
I think that we have to ensure that people understand that there is a human aspect to this work that needs to be preserved. A computer can direct you to certain documents that it believes are connected, but a human can show you a relationship that you didn't know existed. Mm-hmm. For 30 years, Joella Noble-Shear was the curator of manuscripts. And people would always tell us how they loved talking to her because they would come in, tell their research topic, and then she would just go, oh, there's a document in this collection related to that. Now, you would never know that from the finding aid, which is what an AI would look. It would look through the documents, it would look through the finding aids to say, okay, here are the connections. But they wouldn't know that there are records related to a certain topic that's not on the finding aid, but it's related to what you're researching. And so I think that we need to remember that there's a human element to research that always needs to be there if you're going to do serious research, if you really want to make those connections. And I think it's incumbent upon us who know better to ensure that that stays the same, because there will be people who just don't care. Oh, just digitize it all. Oh, just let the AI tell you. Who cares if you can't make that connection? Because they don't care. That's why I say that friendly fire. You have to watch out for those who aren't necessarily against you, but can hurt you because they just don't know. So you have to then be the champion for it. So I think that those of us who know better are gonna have to champion things and have to form that stone wall of no. And I know you don't want to be the person who's always saying no, but sometimes you have to say, no, this isn't good for our collection. This isn't good for our institution. No. And so I think that that's gonna have to happen more and more, you know.
And that was one of the things Dorothy Porter was good at, was that making that connection of stuff that you didn't actually see in the card catalog. She could connect you with some other materials that you didn't really see.
Yeah, and that happens through learning and through doing research and doing, and your own knowledge. Can't be replicated.
Question? Comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mike Smith. I was a working student at the Moorland Room in the early 70s. And Dr. Porter was made a tremendous impression on all the staff as well as the students. She set up the scholarship fund for the students. And I don't know, Jan, do you remember she used to have monthly luncheons where she brought in scholars to speak to the students. Sterling Brown and others. I guess Sterling Brown stands out because he was my favorite. I was concerned about capacity. I read and see great people in our history who have left their body of work at other institutions. And not being a librarian, I would get the response that those institutions had the capacity to maintain the work, the body of work that they're asked to deposit there. Can you speak, well, I'm glad to hear that the city is doing the same thing. I'm more concerned about our institutions maintaining the body of work that our people created. Can you speak to that?
I can, but I will answer it in a way that I don't indict myself. I will just say that if there is an institution and you would like to donate your papers to them, instead of saying, oh, assuming that they don't have the capacity, how about you help them get the capacity? You don't have to pay for it yourself. Especially if they're an important enough person, they can go find resources to support the processing of that collection, support expanding capacity of that collection. You don't have to just say, oh, well, they can't protect it, so I'll give it over here because I don't feel like doing work. That's what they're saying. I don't really want it to go there. Because if you wanted it to go there, you would have found a way to get it there. Because there were still people donating. Like, people said that about Moorland-Spingarn for years. Oh, I know they can't process my collection. Why can't they? Why don't you just go there and find resources to get your collection processed? You want it processed, talk to somebody and say, hey, let's have this person come process that collection so it can be made available. There are ways around the physical capacity. Because there are places like Iron Mountain, store stuff out there. You don't have to be physically in the building. And if you need it, just schedule it, they'll send it back. So there are ways to work around capacity. And if someone is serious about wanting to donate their materials to our institutions and continue to support our institutions, then I think they should do the work of having it at those institutions. That's my personal opinion. Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
I just wanted to let you know there's an excellent book about Dorothy Porter. It's a quick read. Janet is the author.
And Charlene helped.
We ended up going over every single word together. Also, it's very nice to see you all. In 3 weeks, I celebrate my 50th anniversary of graduating from HU. So, thank you.
Congratulations on being do y'all say golden bison? Yeah, okay, all right, you golden, so you'll be a golden alum. Congratulations on that.
We went fast. Enjoy these 40 years, okay? They're still the high point of my life.
Any other questions or comments from the audience here? Brother John, yeah, oh, all right.
When we were talking about making the archives more accessible to the broader community, could you speak on maybe like the relationship between archival organizations or repositories and broadcast media outlets and news outlets and film organizations?
That's another complex relationship because those relationships tend to be very extractive. You know, they just, okay, oh, you have this, give it to me. Now it's mine. I'll do whatever I want with it and never come back to you again. So now you're just in the dust. But sometimes they can direct people to your institution. Some people do watch the credits. And they'll say, oh, that's material from Moorland-Spingarn. Oh, that's material from the Schomburg Center. And so it can promote your institution. So in some ways it can promote your institution, and in some ways it can be very extractive, depending on the production, depending on who's doing the work. So that's a complex relationship because sometimes it can help the archive, and then sometimes it can hurt the archive because, oh, now we have it. We don't ever have to go to you again. And you know, copyright is finite. It has an expiration date. So all of this, oh, I'm not taking your copyright. Institutions outlive people. So when that copyright is gone, it's gone. And you don't have to worry about them using your material because it's no longer your material, it's their material. So, you know, that's why I always say think long term about things because, you know, it's finite and you need it. Typically, Black institutions need the recognition of their collections more than other institutions. And so if you give away what makes you unique and makes you important, then you've marginalized yourself. So it's a tricky relationship, you know, because it can be very, I'm not going to use the term that popped into my head. It can be very, you know, double-edged sword.
Brother Jonathan.
Just like a piggyback. So, Dr. Lopez Matthews. So kind of just a piggyback to the last question. So I think like one of the things that I've always been curious about and I've always been considering is like, what does that look like when you think about the relationship between archives and digital media and broadcasting and just like film about, you know, centers like the Schomburg, like Moorland, actually creating their own like, you know, own houses, production houses to then be able to like create that work. So I was kind of just like curious on what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's great because I think that it puts you in a space to get more eyes on your collection. And as more people see your information, they'll think more highly of you. You know, that's one of the things that I've noticed that Schomburg has always had over Moorland, was that Schomburg always knew how to promote itself. It always knew how to promote itself, whereas Howard and Moorland was more focused on building its research reputation. And so you understood that you came here to do serious research, that this amazing collection is here, but it didn't have the flash of somewhere like Schomburg. And so it has never gotten the level of respect and attention because it doesn't have the level of flash that brings eyes on you. And so I think that with social media and having your own production houses, as you mentioned, will help bring those eyes on the institution so more people learn about what's in the collection. But you know, and I know people hated me for it, but I was a fan of the watermark. So I said, ain't nothing leaving out of here without a watermark on it. If you look at the ones I do, you know they're the ones I do because they got Moorland-Spingarn written all over. Because I said, you can look at this and see how pretty and nice it is, but you're not going to steal it without us getting credit for it. Because people love to do that. Oh, let me crop this out. You know, so that's why I'm always big with the watermark. So, because it also gets your name out there. You can take this picture, sure. But you go promote us in the process. And so I think that it will go a long way to promoting the collection. So that's my thought.
I have an observation and a question.
Yes.
Piggybacking on Mr. Nightingale's question about AI. So being that AI is inevitable, yes, and it's going to happen,
yes,
what would you recommend for historians and librarians in order to put themselves in a position to be able to contribute to that? Should we push back against it? Is there possibly an outcome where it would be the Dorothy Porter situation all over again? Since we didn't participate, then we got edged out of it. And that's a question for you and Dr. Sims Wood. What do you recommend our position should be as far as AI is concerned?
Well, you can't stop it.
Yes.
You can't stop progress. So you just have to figure out what you feel comfortable with and how you want to engage with it. You're gonna have to engage with it, but you have to figure out how you want to engage with it on your terms. Like, as I'm reading now, there are already companies coming up with ways to identify AI-generated text. Like they're like, oh, the students are gonna start using AI for their papers. Turnitin is already on it. They already have an app and a plugin that will check for AI technology in papers. They already have it.
And incidentally, they're beginning to figure out how to defeat Turnitin.
But it's always a battle between that. And so even with archival documents, the preservation systems are working on ways to verify documents. To say, okay, this document is actually, the real document is what you're looking at. Or, oh, this document has been altered. And so you know that you're not actually looking at the real thing. So even with the digital preservation systems, we're learning. So I think we have to just contend with the fact that it's coming. We have to learn about it, and we have to learn how we're going to interact with it and how it's going to affect our work now.
Yeah, I agree with Lopez. It's not going away. It's going to be here. So we have to learn how to deal with it. Again, trying to make sure that documents that we have that you have the current and correct document there without it being altered or anything. So it's something that it scares me, but I know it's here. It's not going away. So we have to find ways to interact with what's going on. So it's hard, because and just like with the music folk now, they're suing because you're taking people's voices and making it into your own, and they haven't recorded it and all. So it's not going away. So we have to learn how to interact with it as librarians and archivists.
I guess what I was thinking, does it have the potential to become a worthwhile, Lopez compared it to a finding aid. Does it have that potential, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And teachers are also now beginning to learn how to use AI in their classrooms. So again, it's not going away. So we have to learn how to make it so that it's not destructive, hopefully, to the information that we're putting out there.
My final question, my question is for those of you who've worked at the Moorland, who may have had some experience with Dorothy Porter Wesley or some of the distinguished alumni, if you could share some of your stories.
I guess what I remember is how people all came here. You know, the writer David Garrow, he wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book about Martin Luther King. Well, he did it here, and I was helping him. I said, you know what, you're going to win a Pulitzer, and you better give us credit. And he did. I mean, that was the kind of thing. It was just every day you were meeting somebody. Eloise Greenfield came through a lot, and I got to be a children's specialist because I had children. And, you know, there's so many children's books in Moorland, you wouldn't even know about it, you know. I did bibliographies, but it was just fantastic. The years I spent here, I went to the Library of Congress and spent 25, 26 years. But the years I spent here, the friendships I made are the ones that have carried me through, including as a student. So Howard is just great. HU, you know.
Dorothy Porter was a small, short woman that did not take fools lightly. When you came to her, you had to come straight, or she would tell you. She was willing to share, and she was always kind, but don't play with her. And so I respected her for that. You know, I was like, oh, go ahead. And you're like, she was about 90 pounds. And so when she moved and when she spoke, people respected her. They looked up to her. She knew what she was talking about. People knew her legacy and how important she was to the whole profession of librarianship. It was because of Dorothy Porter, Dr. Dorothy Porter, short Dr. Porter.
You bring up something that makes me have this inspired a question. I've read a lot of interviews. I've read her words. What did her voice sound like? And did she speak fast or slow?
No, she was very distinctive when she had to say.
She was of that generation where she pronounced every syllable. It was the King.
Thank you.
English.
Okay.
No slang, no black English. It was right. That was her. Very measured tone. Not too fast, not too slow. I mean business, this tone.
It was a soft voice, but a commanding voice at the same time.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're getting close to the time where we need some time to maybe mingle and have a little something to eat, so that we can get out of the room when we're supposed to be out of the room. I thank all of you for being here and for your focus and your consideration, your conscientiousness in asking questions. I just appreciate all of you so much. So I think we're going to close in this way. Committee members, Sammy Johnson was the committee chair, and he's the chief librarian of Moorland-Spingarn. It was his idea to bring the program back to life. He had to step out, though. So I want to acknowledge Brother Sammy Johnson, Christina Vortia, the rare book librarian for our library division, was on the committee. Tariana Smith in the back, throw your hand up, sis. Access Services for Founders Library was on the committee, and Sonia Woods was on the committee.
Wonderful, Sonia Woods.
And thank you all for listening.
And Dr. and I'm just very glad that we got Dr. Matthews. And actually, it was when we brought the program idea to Dr. Talton. Thank you. I'm sorry. When we put the proposal for the program in front of Dr. Talton, he said, "Why don't we also invite Dr. Janet Sims Wood to come and to speak about her experience, and that be a bridge between Dorothy Porter Wesley and Lopez." So I will say Dr. Talton was also a
Ex officio.
thank you. You already know an ex officio member of the committee. So thank for all of you for being here and coming and enjoying our space. Bless you. All right, it's food in the back.
And I'm gonna get some because I'm starving.
Thank you so much. All right, appreciate it. Mike, okay. Lopez. We need to take a picture first. Oh, yes. If you don't mind. Somebody's calling you or you calling somebody. Or beside it.